up, friends and RC family? My name is Alec from High Noon Hobby. If you're new to the channel, I appreciate you checking it out very much. And if you aren't new here, I appreciate you coming back and stopping back in for another Sunday video. This time we're going to be taking a nice easy stroll through a kind of mountainous trail in the Salt Lake area, as you saw in the intro clip there. Very beautiful mountain trail with an awesome view of Salt Lake as you make your way up the ridgeline. This first little obstacle here can be quite a doozy. It might be one of the more difficult ones on the entire trail, and we've actually kind of had to piece this together. There's the rock that my passenger front just hit was not there initially, but there just wasn't quite enough grab in this obstacle, or maybe enough horizontal depth in this obstacle to actually get trucks like the TRX4 up and over the obstacle without just kind of gunning it over the obstacle. There was just too much of a breakover angle and there wasn't enough on the other side. So while this looks very difficult, and it's really more of a difficult just because of, or it's more of a difficult line just because of how tight of a squeeze it is right here at the end. But that was more or less intentional, as we added that rock that you're seeing basically push me into the cliffside, if you will, or the rock on the driver's side. The rock nearest us, essentially, is a man-made addition to this obstacle, but I think it makes it an enjoyable one. As you can see there, I was hooked up on my high lift jack on the other side. Well, I guess you couldn't see there, but I was hooked up on my high lift jack on the other side. That's something that always happens on the TRX4 Bronco that I've built when you're getting into tight spaces, because I just built it with all sorts of accessories sticking out of the side. Here we've got Doc with his Ryft hitting the line in the typical Buggy fashion, which is just straightforward. However it fits, it'll go, essentially. This isn't too difficult of a crack to really hang up Capras or Ryfts or anything like that. With the clearance that you get on a caged vehicle, there's really not too much of a problem on the gatekeeper for this particular trail for buggies. I personally bring a buggy on this trail usually just for the upper section of this trail. It gets more and more rocky, and if you're familiar with Utah, you probably know the trails typically, as you get higher and higher up in elevation, there's less vegetation, there's less loose soil, and typically it gets into more rocky terrain. And so that's the stuff that we like to bring the buggies for. So for this particular one, I was packing the Capra on my back. And we can see Derek in the TRX4 Defender. He's made some pretty significant modifications to this TRX4 Defender since this video, which I'm sure you'll see here on the channel fairly soon. But as of right now, not too much different from that or on that vehicle from the last time you guys saw it, besides moving away from the stock wheels and tires. Decision I completely endorse. And here you're going to start to see kind of some of the changing terrain of the trails that we deal with here in Salt Lake. Now, first off, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. Everywhere you go, if you need any sort of reason besides these tiny trucks to get out, or even if you need a reason, you shouldn't need a reason to get out into this beauty. It is such an amazing place that we live in, and I'm sure you've got similar things near you, or if you don't, I'm so sorry. This is just, it's incredible what we are gifted here as Utahns, and so getting out and enjoying these mountains, enjoying the fresh air, getting out of the gross pollution of the valley is what it's all about. Unfortunately for us, we on this particular run started to run into some pretty severe mud, as you can see here. Pretty bad stuff, pretty sludgy. Love to stick to these G8 compound tires. Now this is exactly why no one in the Salt Lake community that I know at least endorses the Predator compound as a typical compound to run. Everyone says run the G8 compound from Proline, and the reason for that is exactly this. Our trails are gross, and if you get Predator compound in any pattern, it just all the gunk just sticks to the Predator compound and you'll never get it off. The G8 compound at least allows for a little bit of release of that material. It's not quite as sticky as the Predator is. It's definitely sticky and stuff still sticks to it, but it's less sticky than the Predator, and it's negotiable when you're talking about stuff like this, where you're just in deep mud and then you're going to some rock formations right after, like this. And it always makes it more interesting to hit a technical rock line right after you've just been driving through a whole bunch of mud. You got to kind of sit there, work your tires, you got to work the mud out of the tread, and you got to get those lugs open back up so that then you can start to actually negotiate the obstacle. And you got to hope that you're not putting mud in places that is a pivotal spot for your tire to grip. So that's always a fun thing when there's a whole lot of mud on the trail here in Salt Lake or here in Utah. And then, inevitably, just given our location, we're going to be hitting technical rock lines at some point. So it's a fun little dynamic that we like to deal with, that we have to deal with, not necessarily that we like to deal with it. But let me know what you think about how this Bronco performs on some of these lines. I think it does pretty well. I know that I've got a long way to go. I need a lot more weight down low on this rig if I'm going to continue to have as much weight as I do up high. So with all of the additions I've made aesthetically to the body, adding all of the racks on the side and the roof rack and all of the kind of scale accessories and whatnot, that's cool and all, but it adds a ton of weight up top. So to compensate for that, I plan on adding even more weight down low, which I know you're probably looking at me saying, Alec, you're crazy. Why are you going to do that? This thing already weighs way too much. You just need to start taking weight off. But that's not really the purpose of this truck for me. The purpose of this truck is it's the Pig. It's supposed to be big and burly and indestructible, and just that's what I want to make it into. So that's what I'm going to make it into. But unfortunately, metal axles and all that sort of stuff are expensive, and I've already put a lot of money into this rig as well as a lot of money into other rigs right now, and I've got a whole bunch of other projects going on that I want to share with you guys. So I promise it will come. It's just not here quite yet. The front bumper also needs to go. It's great. It looks great. I love the looks of it, especially in photos. I think that the kind of dynamic that it plays, being as big as it is cool. But for actually driving the truck, it's a total nuisance. And so it needs to go eventually. Right now it's staying because it's pretty and it's got my winch on it, which I end up needing a lot of the time because I don't have weight all in the right places with this truck right now, and so the winch is playing more of a pivotal role than maybe it should. But hey, we got to keep everything the way it is for now because it's at least working, sort of. As you can see through this upper section, as we kind of make our way up this ridge line, and I mentioned this before, but the rock lines get more and more technical, and I was kind of being stubborn here. I mean, we're getting to the point now where typically people will start to pull out their Capras or some other buggy vehicle, and they'll start hitting these lines with buggies, but I just always like to see how far up the Bronco is going to make it before I give up, because it's never the Bronco that gives up. I'm sure the Bronco would make it through, or I could throw it through, but I typically give up at some point after 10 minutes or so of trying some particular line, and I switch to the buggy at that point. But it is fun to see just how far you can push these TRX4's, and you can push them really far. It is impressive what these things can do. But just persistence, patience is a virtue. You got to sit there, you got to work it, you got to find the line, but you can find it with these TRX4's a lot of the times, especially with those locking differentials. I mean, they perform really, really well. And as I was just saying, this is the point where people start pulling out buggies. It looks like Derek has put away his TRX4 Defender on this line, and he pulled out the buggy, and I don't blame him. This is actually another one of the more difficult obstacles on this trail, and I'm actually bypassing the obstacle right now in this clip. The obstacle that Derek just hit is, even though this looks the same or looks similar, the obstacle that Derek just hit is just barely to the right out of frame, and I took the line that is one further down, which is much easier to much easier to hit. So this is the only way that I've found to get the Bronco through that section right there. Still get some good tire lift. It's a good action line nonetheless, and then you've got this issue here where you come out pretty sideways, and you got to kind of correct for that, make sure that you don't end up on your roof. You see the Ryft just eating lines and throwing rocks in the background there. And again, pushing the Bronco past what I would say are or is my comfort zone with this truck. I don't know that I've ever actually gotten this line with this truck, but it is kind of fun to, I don't know, try at least. And of course, making it more difficult for myself by knocking off a large piece of rock that was attached at one point to the left side of that obstacle, but is no longer. But there's just no way. Once you get into a position like that, I think you basically are calling the line done. I'm trying to fight through it to see if there's any way that I can get that to level out the way that I want it to, but that tire is like, what, 2 tires, 3 tires off the ground. Now it's back down to 1 tire off the ground, but even after it's settled, that didn't get me any ground. I'm still diffed out in the back. So this line's just a frustrating one. It looks like it should be doable, but there's no good way to get up it in a big body truck like this. If you're in a buggy, you can kind of sneak your way, wedge your way up the crack that you're seeing right under my driver wheel right there, but it's just not going to happen in a bigger truck like this. I think this may be the last line that I attempted, or one of the last lines that I attempted, maybe the last one that I filmed in the TRX-4 Bronco before I switched to the Capra. But a pretty line nonetheless. You know, you've got that beautiful mountain in the background there. That's I believe that's Olympus. So if you're unfamiliar with this area, the Olympus Hills area is it's on the east side of the valley. It's full of different access to the mountains all across, and there's tons of different trails behind. And it all leads up to Olympus Mountain, which we are actually kind of one ridge over from that right now in this video, but very beautiful hiking nonetheless. And yep, that last line was a good one I got through. This one, you know, this is the start of basically, this is the only way to get a big body through this section, is just winching and getting towed. So appreciate you, Doc, for towing my butt out of here with your Ryft, because no way the Bronco would have made it through that crack with my driving skills without you. So appreciate that. I guess I did throw one more in here. This is kind of the gatekeeper line to the upper section. It's really not that difficult, but it's a pivot turn, which I kind of cut off the beginning of this line, where you pivot, take a pretty sharp left-hand turn, and then you start up this ascent here. And this kind of marks the beginning of the bigger rock field that we like to hit with our buggies. So as I've kind of been saying that all that stuff before is the beginning of the rock or the beginning of the buggy area, that last line right there truly is basically the beginning of the buggy area for everyone at that point. So that is where I put away the Bronco. This line is just way too gnarly for big body trucks. You can't really tell from this angle, but the line is definitely very off camber, and then there's a good wedge to get up to the off camber line. So those two combined factors just make it really tough to make your way up this in anything other than a buggy. And that was a clean run from Doc on the final line. And now, of course, I've got to send it in the high noon Capra. So let's get it up here. I've actually changed the Capra, or I did change it right before recording this video. If you've noticed in my previous Capra videos, or if you watched the video that I had about how to put the dig servo into the Capra, you'll hear me explain that the way that I set it up is just 100% in either direction and then a center point for that rear wheel steer. And that's because I don't have a dial like you would get on a FlySky controller. With the Spectrum Rugged, the DX5, all you get is switches. You don't get dials, which seems ridiculous to me. I don't know why they didn't put a dial on there for such an expensive control. Either way, that's getting out of the spectrum of this talk. Either way, spectrum. The way that I changed it is, instead of doing just 100% in either direction, so it was basically just a 3-position switch where the center position was the center position of the wheels, and then going out to either direction on the switch would give you 100% steering in either direction. While that's nice for speed in terms of just selecting that really quickly, throwing that steering angle in super fast, I noticed that it wasn't giving me the accuracy that I needed. So you'll see right here why it seems like it takes forever for me to steer the rear wheels here. Now, granted, this is at 50% speed. Hi, Lando. The reason that this is taking me so long is because I switched it from 100% in either direction to steps of 20%. So the steps are nice, but especially while I'm filming, it's difficult. And just in general, I don't know if it's going to be efficient enough for me to want to do that in the long run. But for now, I'm just trying it out, trying to see if the steps is going to be a good option for me. But the High Noon Capra kills the last line, and this is where we typically make it to. Sometimes we take it a little bit further, but that's all I've got for us today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to High Noon Hobby for more content, more videos every Friday and Sunday, in fact, and potentially even more weekly content coming up. But for now, I'm sticking to that. I know that I can, I know that I have, and I hope that you guys are enjoying it. I certainly am. So for now, we'll see you next time. Thanks, folks.